This is a particularly good time of year for me to give this talk because, as everyone in my office knows, and many of you, we are right in the middle of promotion season. And we have the biggest promotion group that we've had in a very, very long time, which is a very good thing. It means that our faculty are progressing and doing really well. And given that we would like to keep that going, I'm here to let you know about promotion and tenure so that, in particular, for those of you who are contemplating going up, and I would hope all of you who have a promotion ahead of you are contemplating going up and making plans, so I can help you be successful in that and remove some of the questions you might have about how to be successfully promoted at the University of Michigan. Okay, there we go. So I start at a pretty high level, but don't worry, I get really, really granular really fast. And also this is being recorded and will be available in video and also the slides on the Faculty Development website. So you can, this happened to me once before in this room. Okay, so the purpose of an academic medical center and the function is we educate medical students and graduate students. We provide the environment for residency, which is GME, and postdoctoral training. We advance medical science. We expand the knowledge base of human biology, pathophysiology, and therapy, and we provide outstanding cutting-edge patient care. So I'm frequently asked, what do our faculty look like? This is going to provoke a seizure, I swear. What does our faculty look like, and how much have we grown? As you know, there are three distinct tracks. The instructional track, which is also known as the tenure track, the research track, and the clinical track. And then there are lecturers. And those folks are kind of an undifferentiated state. And as they progress, they'll move into one of the other tracks. And as you can see, our total number of faculty over the last 5 years, excuse me, a little bit more than that, has significantly, 10 years, has significantly increased. And this is actually huge growth in faculty for academic medical centers. And if you look, you can see that the clinical track accounted for almost all of the increase in our number of faculty. So there was a huge uptick in appointments to the clinical track about 8 years ago. And that trend is certainly continued, and it will only be even more evident going forward. The instructional track has also had some increase in number of faculty, but far less than the clinical track. The research track likewise increases, but not by much. And lecturers bounce around a little bit since it's usually a short-term appointment. I'm frequently asked about the representation of women at the medical center, and in particular on the various tracks. And I'll tell you, on the instructional track, women have constituted the 24% of the instructional track since 15, 20 years ago. And it's been very concerning that that number never budged for so long. And it was especially puzzling because we track, in my office, promotions, and we knew women on the instructional track were being promoted at the same rate, if not faster, than their male colleagues. So we finally came around and asked the magical question: how many of offers on the instructional track go to women? And lo and behold, it's 24%. So that was the explanation. So we brought this forward, and maybe about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and we saw progressively, because the people making the offers were unaware that there was this bias, it's called unconscious bias. They thought they were about 50-50. So once this was brought to people's attention, the world started to change. And indeed, offers started to go up for women from 24% to 27% to 33% and then into the 40s. So, and this change, now it's been long enough, has been reflected overall in the percentage of women. And finally, the percentage of women has increased a bit on the instructional track. And there's still a lot of contemplation about why that's the case, that it's not 50-50, especially because the clinical track from its very beginning, in essence, was 50% men and 50% women. The research track, again, varies quite a bit, but tends to be around 40% women. And lecturers, clinical lecturers, entry-level faculty has always been about 50-50 as well. So the model now for a medical school faculty member has shifted a bit. Several decades ago, it was the three-legged stool, which I kind of never liked the phrase, but it was clinical care, which was service, research, and teaching. And those were the three areas where people really needed to excel in order to be a successful faculty member. Now it's more like a table, where of course scholarship and research is still a major pillar. Service is also a major pillar, but it's been redefined as institutional, regional, national service and volunteering. There's also professional activities, which actually is the delivery of clinical care in most instances, and of course teaching. And teaching is very important. The University of Michigan is an institution of higher learning. And in our medical school, teaching is important, and on Central Campus, teaching is very important and is weighted highly. So while you're thinking about getting promoted, I want you to know that the promotion process is very, very similar to the appointment process. And you've all gone through the appointment process, and you've all been successful. That's why you're sitting in this audience. So this isn't something brand new. You've been through this before. When you were appointed, the chair and the candidate had a discussion about recruiting you and appointing you. And that went to the Office of Faculty Affairs, the Office of Clinical Affairs if you're a clinician, and to the dean. And then an intent letter was generated. Your appointment package was then fully evaluated by the advisory committees. There's an advisory committee for each track that reviews all appointments and promotions on that track. And then appointments are approved by the executive committee, which is the governing body representing the faculty in the medical school. The packages then go to the EVPMA and provost, and for higher ranked appointments to the regents. And that's when the official offer letter is written and vetted. So I'm going to talk for a moment about Regents Bylaw 509, which basically governs tenure. Assistant professors and other untenured members of the teaching staff are appointed by the president of the university upon recommendation of the dean and the executive committee, and stops. Tenured professional staff are appointed by the Board of Regents upon the recommendation of the dean and the executive committee. So the Board of Regents actually grants tenure. The Board of Regents also wants to know about the various appointments and promotions, but the agenda is really paying the most attention and occasionally debate on the tenure track. So in terms of appointments, similar to promotions, there should be a vetting of the appointment. Does it gel with the standards on Central Campus and the standards that we have established for the medical school on central campus with the provost. There needs to be a letter of intent, evaluative letters, and I'll talk more about those later, and a statement of scholarship, impact, seminal contributions, etc. And of course, the package has to be flawless. So I hope that all of you, if you've come up upon this, you've had a chance to take advantage of the third year mentoring opportunity to take a look at if things are really the way you want them to be in your career. So the question is, are you on the optimal track for your career? So your division and section chief or chair has thought about this when you were appointed and everything else, and the Office of Faculty Affairs weighs in on whether this is an appropriate appointment, and everything's fine, you're appointed, but a third year review is offered through my office. There's a there's an assistant dean for each track, and they are available to you, and we'll send you an invitation to come and talk to them in your third year to see how things are doing. This is really a mentoring opportunity. It's not an evaluative opportunity. It's somebody outside of your department that can give you perspective. And all of the assistant deans are always at the advisory committees, and I'm always at the executive committee. So we know the lay of the land and can offer good advice for you. And the third year review is considered mandatory for instructional and research track faculty. Clinical track faculty are offered this. The reason this is so important, and I'm sort of laboring it a little bit, is that if a faculty member wants to switch tracks, for example, from the tenure track, instructional track to the clinical track, just as an example, doing that early in the career, year 3, 4, maybe 5, is very easy. If you start waiting way down the road to year 7 and 8, and it becomes more and more difficult to make that switch. So if something doesn't fit and you'd like to go in a different trajectory, earlier is better than later. Eventually the window closes completely. So here are the faculty tracks, just to give you an idea. They're in a lot of ways a job description. On the instructional track, the most important thing is scholarship, research, publishing, etc. Teaching is very important. Professional work on the MD side of the house, that's clinical work, and organizational service. On the PhD side of the house, on the right, scholarship is again the biggest bubble, the most important. Teaching is required on the professorial. Teaching is definitely required. It can be in the lab, it can be in seminars, it doesn't have to be in numbered courses, and organizational service. On the clinical track, you can see that there's a shift where professional work, clinical care, being an outstanding clinician is very heavily weighted. The next is teaching. Actually, the clinical track does the lion's share of teaching in the hospital and on the wards. Scholarship is important for promotion on the clinical track. I will talk more about this because we've recently redefined what scholarship is on the clinical track. And this is the first year the promotion cycle is going through using the new criteria, which has made a huge change in the ability for people to be rewarded and promoted on their scholarship that is something different than grants and peer-reviewed publications. In the research track, scholarship is the most important. In the professorial track, teaching is also required, not in the scientist track. And organizational service is required on the professorial track as well. So as you're sitting there, you say, well, you know, I'm going to be judged here. What's important actually to the University of Michigan? What are they really looking for? And the University of Michigan wants to be one of the best universities in the world, to have the most influential faculty, and to be recognized nationally and internationally as outstanding. So what does this have to do with you? Everything, everything, everything. Absolutely everything. Because that's how you will be judged. Are you making a contribution to those overriding goals? So here you are preparing for promotion. A good first step is to determine, once again, if you're ready to go up. Most departments have internal committees that take a look at more junior faculty to see if they're ready to be promoted. And that is useful. It's useful to meet someone who chairs that committee and talk to them about the expectations. Also, your division or section chief can be very helpful in this regard. And your chair. So if it appears that you are ready to go up and likely to be successful, that is a positive step forward. The next thing is to read the promotion package on the medical school website. We give extremely granular information about how to construct the most effective promotion package. Try to be as transparent as possible. It's not a black box that nobody can understand. There's actually methodology to move ahead successfully. It will also allow you to think about whether you are ready to go up or not. Sometimes it's nice to think about that on your own or with your mentors before you go through a departmental process. An important part of the promotion package, which is weighed heavily by the executive committee as well as Central Campus, is the external reviewers' letters. So these letters must be at arm's length, meaning that they cannot be any collaborators within the last 10 years. It used to be forever, so this is an improvement, 10 years. No mentors, no prior faculty colleagues, less than 10 years. So you have to establish a reputation outside of, frankly, your most immediate comfort zone. So the number of internal versus external letters that are required varies by track and rank. It's not worth putting it on a slide. It's on the faculty website. The evaluator must be at the rank proposed for the promotion or above on the same track or on the tenure track if you're on the tenure track. Letters must be a mix of reviewers recommended by the chair and recommended by the candidate. The way it should be done is you are allowed to suggest people that you think will write a good letter for you. And I'll give you some examples about how you can be pretty sure about that. You can't ask them. You can't twist their arm because this is supposed to be completely anonymous. So you can make suggestions. Your chair is obligated to make at least 2 suggestions. And the provost makes us detail who said, is this a candidate or is this a chair reviewer? So then it goes out. You will never know who got your requests for review. And frankly, think about this because it takes some strategy. The more prestigious the letters, the better. From peer institutions, thought leaders, top people, those are very powerful letters in your favor. One thing, some faculty members think there's kind of an extra something if they get a letter from Europe or outside of the United States. And most chairs know very well which reviewers in Europe, for example, understand the US system, which is very different than theirs. We ask a question of all the reviewers, and it's helpful to actually see go on the faculty website. We have to ask the reviewers certain questions. And one is, would this person be promoted? Or would this person be promoted and tenured at your institution? And in Europe, a tenured faculty member basically has to die before another faculty member can move into that slot. So if they're going to be absolutely honest, they'd say, well, no, nobody's looking like they're going to die soon. So it's very important to make sure that the external reviewer will judge you by US standards and University of Michigan standards. And we send that to them, so they're not actually operating out of total ignorance. And this process takes quite a while. The letters take the longest and should be really in process by May or June prior to when you want to go up. So the promotion package really has two parts. There are things that you are responsible for and things that the department is responsible for. You are responsible for talking points, which is a short document where you get to describe in your own words what your contributions are and how you spend your time. There's a CV, you're responsible for that. It goes through MCV. We'll talk about that in a bit. There's an educator portfolio. If you have a major interest in medical education and have put a lot of effort into that, created curriculum, written curriculum, etc., that's a very important document. There's also a research portfolio where you get to put in your own words your contributions to scholarship and research at the University of Michigan. And as people do research in so many different ways, it used to be, if you looked at papers and grants, you knew exactly what a faculty member did. Now, not so much. And it's worthwhile explaining your unique contributions to the field. You choose 5 key papers. They should be since your last appointment or last promotion, so it's in rank. And it's better if you're first or senior author on those papers. And you get to talk about why they're important in your bibliographic notes. And if it is in your favor, you can look up your citation survey, H-index, etc. If it's very high, you can include it. If it's not, you don't have to. So also we have the external letters, as I spoke about. And all of this is due in the medical school on that fateful day of October 1st. In your department, they will generate a Form B, which later is used as the provost transmittal letter about you. All of your contributions in clinical care, in teaching, in research, in service will be detailed. This then goes to the various advisory committees and to the executive committee. We use the chair's letter and Form B to write the dean's letter on your behalf. And that goes to the provost. So talking points. This is a single, it's usually more than that, 2 pages, commentary by the candidate describing his or her scholarly niche and type of scholarship, professional expertise, contributions, special skills, national leadership, etc. You can also include the amount of clinical effort. Don't put down a percent, just put down low, medium, or high, and the kind of clinical work that you do. Your CV has to be in the medical school model. Your CV is your academic history. It's an overall overview of your accomplishments. It absolutely must be precise and flawless. It must be produced from MCV. And you are ultimately responsible for the accuracy of the information. So don't give it to an administrator to do it. You have to check it to make sure that it's correct. And talk about the nice thing about MCV, although admittedly it's a pain in the neck to input everything the first time around, is it creates CVs in the medical school format that is the same for everyone. And it makes your reviewer's job easier because they look at your CV and they know where the information is. There's one piece of good mentoring that I got young on for reviewers. This was grant reviewers, but it's the same thing. My mentor said, don't annoy your reviewers. Just don't annoy your reviewers. Put everything very clear, because if they have to work to review you, they will not be as favorable to you as if it's easy and you seem well organized and so forth. So the MCV is good for that. Okay, that's enough. A cautionary tale. This has actually come up. A false CV is a very, very serious thing and can result in not only non-promotion or dismissal for academic misconduct. I mean, it's fraud. So be sure your CV is accurate and free of errors. Check the dates, all of that kind of stuff. We rarely have any problems, but sometimes a simple error can really raise red flags, and it's taken very seriously. By the way, all of the publications are checked against PubMed. All of the grants are checked against national databanks automatically. Educator's portfolio. We all are required to teach, okay? But different people have different amounts of teaching and different amounts of contribution in that particular mission. So talk about, is teaching central or secondary in your job? Summary of your teaching and time, and major teaching contributions. If you wrote 3 courses that are now widely used, put it down. That is a real contribution to our teaching mission. The research portfolio gives the candidate an opportunity to describe their research and unique contributions to the research. Now I'm going to talk for a second about team scientist. This is becoming more and more common, which was inevitable. Now people are on very large teams. And it's very important when you're on a team to define in advance what everyone's contributions will be. The point is, you can be a team scientist and you don't have to be totally, completely, and absolutely independent, which used to be the old standard, but you do have to be an independent thinker and bring independent insights and talent to the team. So keep that in mind. We changed the promotion package maybe 4 or 5 years ago so that members of various teams can describe their roles specifically in each of those teams and can request supporting letters from fellow teammates to verify their independent contributions and the importance. And the phrase that I love to see is, this team is incredibly successful, they're publishing, they got tons of grants, etc. And the last line I always like is, and none of this would be possible without the contributions of Dr. X. And the perfect example is in bioinformatics. If you look at someone who's in bioinformatics and you look at their titles of their papers and their grants, it's like, what does this person do? 1 minute it's the pulmonary microbiome, the next minute it's the genetics of diabetes, the next minute, it's like, what is this? So the research portfolio gives you the opportunity to explain that and how it all makes sense. Remember, your promotion package doesn't stop in the medical school. It has to go to Central Campus. All right, so just to let you know how long this takes, the promotion is due, your promotion package is due in the medical school on October 1st. We go through it. I have an absolutely outstanding staff, and they go through every single promotion to make sure that all the pieces are there so that the faculty member has time and the department has time to fill in any blanks. For example, you need another letter, you need this, you need that. So that's a big undertaking early on, going through these hundreds of promotions. And then after the package is passed, that it's complete, it's correct, etc., it goes to the advisory committees, and then it goes to the executive committee. The advisory committees are the final approval for clinical assistant professor. The executive committee is the final approver for clinical assistant professors, assistant research scientists, and research assistant professors. They're then approved by the EVPMA, and then go to the provost, where there's an entire advisory board. In the advisory board, our advisory committees, your package is reviewed by 2 reviewers, just like an NIH study section, and then everybody discusses it and votes. At the executive committee, your packages are presented, and there's a formal vote. At the level of the provost, there's another advisory committee where 2 reviewers review your package, and then the provost decides whether indeed the package should go forward or not. Then goes to the president, and then goes to the regents. And after all of that, your promotion is final and effective on September 1st. So if you take a look, from starting in your department and your own internal advisory committees, all the way to your promotion is a full year. So keep that in mind. So last year, we're not done with this promotion cycle yet. The promotions all go over, by the way, to the provost on Valentine's Day, which has destroyed that holiday for me. The regents vote in May, and the appointments become effective in September. So here are the promotions from last year. On the research track, there were 32 promotions, which is a reasonable year. On the clinical track, there were many more promotions than we had seen before, and this was before the new guidelines came on board. So we had 144 promotions, and if you notice, many of the promotions were now to associate professor and full professor. So that's been a real shift over the last 10 years. People are moving up in rank through the clinical track more so than previously. On the instructional track, there were 91 promotions, 44 professors, 46 associate professors, and 1 an independent granting of tenure. On occasion, especially when an associate professor is hired in from the outside, they may be hired in without tenure. So it's a separate step to grant them tenure. The common pattern is when a person becomes an associate professor, they're tenured at the same time. So all in all, 267 promotions. That's more than 50% of all the promotions in the University of Michigan completely. So what's the bottom line? The promotion process recognizes excellence nationally and internationally. The timeline is long, and care is needed every step of the way. So I'll share with you some things I wish I had known sooner. A promotion package really starts on your first day on faculty. It takes at least 5 years to do it well, usually. So do your grants, publish well, of course, do scholarly work, get grants. It's important on the instructional track, but even keeping your head down and doing your work really isn't enough. You need to cultivate relationships in your field. National presence and reputation is very important. So you need to be active in your professional societies. That is really a great way of having the thought leaders and the people that you will need to write you letters get to know you, how you think, your work, etc. It's very valuable. Meet the leaders in your field and help them get to know you. Give talks. Get up on stage, get at the microphone, at national meetings, visiting professorships, all of that matters. So you need to get out there, even if sometimes people say, if I just publish that, it's enough. It's not. You need to get out there. And you will always be also judged on your national presence and in the professorial title on your international presence. So develop a theme in your work that you own. As a very junior faculty member, you frequently have great mentors. And sometimes your work kind of overlaps with the mentor. Eventually, that has to break apart, and you have to have work that you own and that is identified with you. And that helps you build a place for yourself nationally. And by the way, self-promotion is not a sin. Some of us have a hard time with self-promotion. You have to do it. Just do it with intelligence and honesty. And take care of your end game. At the end of the day, you're going to need those letters. So you better work on making sure that you have people who would be delighted to write you a letter and who have no conflict. So again, not a direct collaborator. So what are research and scholarship? They're more or less synonymous. They're the key elements of expanding our knowledge base. That's what we're in the business of doing. These can be pursued to benefit mankind in clinical care scholarship and medical education scholarship just as much as in basic research, which is also called the scholarship of discovery. Let's get that. So there is scholarship of discovery. Also, there's now the scholarship of integration. When we start thinking about clinical research, clinical translational research, or in terms of delivery and integrating our discoveries with the clinical world. There's the scholarship of application. There's the scholarship of teaching. And a lot of this takes teams. So here's team science. This is the way it is now. I mean, almost no one works in isolation, and teams are very powerful. Every member of the team has to have their own voice. So mind that as you get involved in these fantastic teams that you can work with. It also helps a lot that in a functional team, each member of the team can have their identity in first or last authored manuscript. You can't hang out in the middle all the time. Also, to be a co-PI, very important, or a PI on a grant. And actually these multiple PI grants, you will be judged with a co-PI the same way you will be judged as a PI. It's not half a PI, it's not 75% of a PI, it's the equivalent of a PI. And we do that because the NIH does it. Similarly, in first and last authorship, co-first authorship and co-last authorship, that's okay too. And that's counted. But the big thing is, even in team science, you have to establish your own national and international reputation. So that gets to speaking. A new area, relatively new, in the promotion package is innovation, discovery, and entrepreneurship, which is very interesting. And it's to recognize innovation, discovery, and entrepreneurship in terms of the impact that those activities have. So the committee would evaluate the candidates' contributions to, for example, technology transfer and true entrepreneurship. If applicable, outside reviewers could be asked to evaluate the candidate's broader impact in entrepreneurship or business through startup, consulting, technology transfer, or other relevant activities. As you would imagine, this is kind of hard to judge. I mean, we don't have checkboxes for this. But there are some very good examples of people who have advanced in their promotion and academic life because they excelled in innovation, discovery, and entrepreneurship. So if you're heading in that direction, you could read some examples to get an idea of what the template might look like. So in taking care of the milestones, it's very important to have good mentors, so find them. Several are best. You're going to need different people at different times of your career. It's always good to get a mentored grant early. It'll help you learn how to write a grant, and it'll help you get on your feet in terms of doing research. An example would be a K Award or a Career Development Award. Publish and speak nationally early. Get up and do an abstract, if nothing else. And build relationships in your field early. And ideally would be to land an independent grant. It used to be year 3, 4, or 5. Now, boy, you know, it's getting to the point where if you can land one by year 5, that's pretty good, especially if you're on a K that goes for 5 years. And I should mention that R01 is not the only key to grantdom. Any federal grant is held in equal esteem. So a DoD grant, merit review grant from the VA, also a major, on a program project grant, if you're the PI on a project, all of these things carry great weight. And now that there are other granting agencies out there, they are getting recognition as well. So in terms of productivity, faculty on the instructional track have in excess of 25 high-quality peer-reviewed publications to be promoted to associate. So now the number is higher than that. It's more in the range of 30-ish, and some people even more. So the majority of the papers should be first or last authored, and there should be a consistent theme that one could see in your work and that hopefully you explained in your research portfolio. And independent funding is really key on the instructional track for promotion. It's not absolutely mandated, but it's pretty close. So on the clinical track, there's been a lot of concern about the fact that a large number of faculty on the clinical track stay at the assistant professor level and don't progress. It's a problem, and it's a big dissatisfier of faculty. We survey the faculty in our faculty satisfaction survey, and people feel stuck. It's not what they wanted to do. So we started working on strategies so people can be successful and be promoted. And some suggestions are to collaborate with PIs conducting translational or clinical research. That's a match made in heaven. I mean, there's going to be papers, there's going to be grants, you can contribute. So that is helpful on the clinical track. But you have to make intellectual contributions. You can't ride on coattails. I mean, you have to be actively engaged. And also develop a specific clinical area of expertise with an accompanying patient care base. Others are to participate in development of clinical guidelines. Now this is, by the way, weighted. You'll see clinical guidelines, especially if they're national or regional, count as much as a manuscript. That's scholarly work. This all has to be peer reviewed. In national societies, participate in writing of position statements and guidelines, another good reason to become involved with your national societies. And also, there's really an expanding area in patient safety and quality leadership. There's a program called Pasquale, but you'll see that there's actually a path on the clinical track looking at patient safety and quality. So here are the new pathways that are no longer new. They were used in the last appointment cycle, and now they're being used in the current promotion cycle. And although you never know how things are going to really play out, I mean, these haven't gone to the provost yet, it's been really terrific to see the clinical track pathways and changes result in so many people who were not being recognized for fine scholarly work finally being recognized. So these are pathways of excellence. And these came about because in looking at clinical faculty, one of the problems sometimes is in moving from assistant to associate is they just, you know, they're good faculty members, they're trying to do everything, and they bounce all over the place. and never really gain traction in the area that perhaps they're most passionate about. So in talking and surveying clinical track faculty, faculty interests tend to fall into particular areas. And one is the clinician research scholar. So these are clinical track faculty members who do translational research, clinical research, health services research. So what counts as scholarship? Just like always, peer-reviewed publications, both traditional and digital, book chapters now count, reviews count, such as in the Clinics in North America series. Up to date counts, gets more hits than most articles for sure. Research funding is great, it's an add-on. Participation in grant reviews, clinical trial development, patient recruitment at a major level, and leadership of a trial site, research consultancies with industry or other organizations, participation in highly collaborative research. That counts if you can describe what you're doing. And presentations at regional and national meetings documenting your research. Another big area is the clinical educator. And so what counts? There was a real problem with clinical educators because there's not a really robust publication place to go. There's academic medicine, but that's one. But now peer-reviewed publications certainly count, traditional and digital, book chapters, reviews, up-to-date, teaching educational evaluations reflective of regional or national impact. So if you're getting out there and you're educating and there is feedback, you should always get that, or at least someone at another institution who can give information regarding your contributions, that counts. Innovative teaching and educational practices, especially if you write them up. Teaching educational module development, teaching educational publication and reviews, MedEd portal, for example, participation in national guidelines or setting of standards, patient and community education, participation in ABMS boards or other appropriate committees, teaching educational courses, not an abstract, not a talk, but courses at state, regional, or national meetings. Teaching and educating through peer-reviewed social popular media, okay? This isn't just your routine blog, this isn't Twitter, it has to be peer-reviewed. And actually all of this, there's that flavor of peer review. The peer review can be national, it can be regional, and it can even be local. Creation and dissemination of innovative approaches to clinical care, we're seeing more and more of that. And also, curriculum development. So the people who contributed in a major way to the new curriculum are now receiving credit for it. Took a lot of work, took a lot of scholarship. Clinician patient safety quality innovator, a bit of a mouthful. And these are folks that are interested in outcomes and implementation science, innovation. So things that count. Is development of professional quality guidelines and initiatives that have regional or national impact, generation of performance data and performance goals through learning collaboratives, development of best practices, innovative methods of care used more broadly, right? There's always has to be some regional impact. Also, lean patient safety quality initiative leadership. The clinician leader administrator overlaps with one of the previous pathways usually. Nobody gets promoted because they have an administrative job. However, when one is in an administrative or leadership position, there are opportunities for making scholarly contributions. For example, if you move into a position of leadership of regional or national organizations or key committees or boards, if you work with government organizations such as the NIH, the CDC, WHO as a consultant or another role, work with private foundations as consultant or other role, community leadership activities on regional and the national level, outstanding service to a department, medical school, and or the university that results in regional or national recognition. And then, of course, there's the clinician individualized portfolio. There's still freedom. You can craft together whatever career you want. It would be helpful, though, if you talk to your chair and section head, division chief, et cetera, to come up with your own pathway. For example, some faculty members on the clinical track spend a lot of time in the School of Public Health. And they do things over there that are kind of really don't fit into any of the things that I've listed so far. So there's still freedom. There just needs to be scholarship that a reviewer can hold at least some of in their hands. So in taking care of the milestones, teach well, it is really important. Pay attention to your evaluations. If you need help to teach well, get it. It's our mission, but it's also in your best interest because your teaching evaluations are looked at very closely in the advisory committees as well as the executive committee and the provost office. So if things aren't looking that great, you can work with your mentors to get better. Talk with the chair of your department, attend training opportunities offered through the dean's office. The Office of Faculty Development has many, many offerings to make you a better teacher and a more effective teacher and also to have a better time. And be engaged in the process of your own career development. This is just a change in the tenure track. This is Regents Bylaw 509. It governs tenure. It used to be you had to be promoted, had to be tenured prior to your 7th year in the tenure probationary period. We moved it back, and now it's in the 9th year. Once you come up on your 7th year, if you want to have a bit more time and your chair or division chief agree, all you have to do is write a letter to me, both of you sign it, and I will say fine. I guarantee you I will say fine. The only reason we do this is because when we changed the tenure track, the timing of the tenure track several years ago, the provost wanted to track how many people were taking more than the prior 7 years. And I estimated at the time, I would say about 5%, and it's turned out to be about 5%. All right, so what about the granular stuff? Moving from assistant to associate professor on the instructional track or the tenure track. Average time in rank is about 6 years, 7 years. Anything sooner than 5 years is considered an early promotion. So at the associate level, coherent body of work, national reputation, unique contribution to an independent field. This is on the website. I write down the number of publications, mean, median, and mode. So you can see, there's no checkbox, but there is a lay of the land about what an associate professor looks like. You have to have excellent teaching quality and organizational citizenship. On the research track, you notice it's quite similar. There needs to be 7 years median time to go up. External funding, coherent body of work, national reputation, contributions to the field, what people are publishing. On the professorial track, there has to be teaching and organizational citizenship. On the clinical track, again, 7 years. For the people who do go up, they go up in 7 years. And you can see that clinical excellence is at the top, coherent body of work, regional reputation, and unique contribution to an independent field, fewer publications. There has to be outstanding teaching quality and organizational citizenship. And to associate professor, this is on the instructional track. Again, it's about 7 years. You have to have continued national recognition and contributions to the field. Here's the publications, teaching quality and organizational citizenship. On the research, similar. On the clinical track, again, very similar, 6, 7 years in rank. And here's the number of publications. And I will skip this time. There's one thing that hasn't been emphasized in previous talks that I really want to emphasize. It has to do with professionalism and citizenship. There are certain expectations of all faculty, and it seems so second nature, but maybe we have to talk about that a little bit. And these bullet points were actually lifted directly from the medical school bylaws. So faculty must maintain and demonstrate competence in their disciplines as well as integrity in their behavior and work. Faculty are expected to offer mentorship within the entire learning community, including mentorship to faculty colleagues. Faculty are expected to set a high example of collegiality in the workplace with respect for personal boundaries and diversity, sometimes called civility. Confidentiality in clinical, research, administrative, and other professional roles must be absolutely assured. Faculty must avoid conflict of interest and conflict of commitment to the university. And also, academic freedom does not abrogate the requirement for integrity in scholarship, professional confidentiality, collegial behavior, or civility in the workplace. And actually, failures in some of these areas can easily scuttle a promotion. So, faculty development, this is the fun stuff. This is what we've established in my office to help you to succeed. We have over 40 skill development offerings to support clinical and teaching skills, grant writing and publications, leadership and interpersonal development, research management, and mentoring and coaching. So here's some examples. Clinical teaching skill series, the 1-minute preceptor, teaching in the OR and other procedures, turning observation into education, entrustment and autonomy, providing effective feedback, not another boring lecture, evidence-based teaching, etc. We have some excellent grant writing and publication workshops, top 5 errors that authors make, for example, how to respond to grant reviews. This is all on our faculty development website, and you should have received a glossy brochure in your home detailing the offerings for this season. There's also Frank Leadership Development Series and the development of interpersonal skills. So here's the crew. Kevin Chung is in charge of the instructional track, the assistant dean. Nick Lucas is in charge of the research track, and Lise Quint is in charge of the clinical track. And on the left is my staff. They're absolutely fantastic and make coming to work a pleasure. And also their institutional memory is incredible and outstanding. So here's a picture of my assistant deans, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about moving forward to an assistant professor position for clinical lecturer? Because it's only a 2-year appointment, and it's a lot to accomplish in 2 years, I feel. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. In general, to become an assistant professor, you have to have some kind of niche, and there needs to be, and you're talking about the instructional track? Clinical track. Clinical track, it's just 1 or 2 pieces of scholarly work. You know, a couple of papers will do it. All the other things that I just went through also would count. Okay. It's much easier now. Anyone else? Yes?
For the year 3 review, should we be contacting somebody to schedule that, or will we be contacted to schedule it?
You should be contacted. It would be, that call out would start as a clinical assistant professor. You know what I'm saying? It's once you've differentiated into a clinical assistant professor.
That was for the research track.
It's for all.
Okay.
All tracks have third-year reviews opportunities. Yes?
What are the requirements if someone wants to switch from research to instructional track and the curriculum?
From instructional to,
From research track to instructional track.
oh, all right. That's quite a big deal. It has been done. And basically, the research track faculty member has to look like an instructional track faculty member at the same rank in terms of number of publications, grants, teaching, et cetera. And now, I didn't go through so much the research track. The research track is actually quite stringent. And the accomplishments and the bar for on the instructional track looks much of the time almost identical on the research track to the instructional tenure track. And people have shifted now, and there's a good reason to do so. The only place you can be tenured is on the instructional track. The research track is a non-tenure track. So, you know, the guidelines that limit term limits and all this kind of stuff, I mean, the medical school was frankly always opposed to that because without tenure, it's all stick and no carrot, right? You know, if you don't accomplish enough, you're drummed out of the Corps. But if you do accomplish great things, there's no extra reward and there's no security. So people do switch, and it's actually become a bit more common. Yes?
So if you're on the instructional track, what is the benefit of tenure when you reach the associate professor level?
Well, the main thing is you have to be tenured. In the absence, you lose your job. You know.
That sounds like a stick.
Well, but once you're tenured, you still have to be.
What's the benefit?
What's the benefit? That's
instead of switching to the clinical track and everyone getting out of the instructional track, why would you want to stay in it?
many people say it's just all stick and it really doesn't matter. Okay, that's one set of ideas. And indeed, we have a lot of clinical track faculty members who chose not to be on the instructional track, and yet they've had a career that looks identical to an instructional track faculty member with 2 R01s and all sorts of things like that. And they're perfectly happy. The advantage is that once you're tenured, they can't fire you without going through an awful lot. But it doesn't change. You're still supposed to be a decent faculty member. And the other is it's changing. It used to be if you wanted to be a chair or a division chief or a dean or any of the deanlets, of which I'm one, you had to be on the instructional track and tenured. That's becoming much less across the United States. And for example, in clinical departments at Harvard, those faculty members are not eligible for tenure anymore. So, I mean, it's a shifting field. Yes?
So then, given that landscape, that other places have maybe dissimilar tracks and things, when these letters are sent out to say, would they be promoted on this such and such track, how is that determination made if at a different center, it's a totally different center?
Yeah, that's why we were really nervous in this first cycle for the changes in the clinical track. Now, I can tell you, I'm very active in the group on faculty affairs in the AAMC, and all across the United States, all of these academic medical centers are moving in this direction. They might have slightly different tweaks, but they're all moving in this direction on the clinical track. And what we do is if you look at the clinical track promotion, we allow faculty members to put in significant narrative in the CV, directly in the CV, because the reviewers all get that. And also we send to the reviewers our criteria, and we ask them to judge on the basis of our criteria. And so far, it's gone surprisingly well. Yes?
So regarding the time point when you are evaluated for a promotion, is it 5 years, 6 years, 8 years? Is there a certain deadline when you have to do that, you get that promotion, or you will be let go, for example?
On the clinical track, no. Oh, on the instructional track, absolutely. You have to make tenure.
By what time? 6
Oh.
years, 10 years, what's the?
Ideally, by 7 years, you go up in your 7th year. If you want to go up later than your 7th year, you can go up in your 9th year if you ask with your chair for permission from me to do that, and I will say yes. Yes?
As you mentioned yourself, it's not easy to get grants in certain fields. Like in my field, is orthopedic surgery, getting an R grant is very difficult. One of the things that we talked about was the K grant. And there are some people who say K grant doesn't matter at all for promotion. Some people say yes. Does it matter or doesn't matter?
It matters. It is a mentored grant, so it does carry less weight. But you're quite correct, and actually I orient the advisory committees. There are, for example, in thoracic surgery, in some cycles, there's one R01 in the country. That's it. And some other surgical subspecialties are the same. So you actually need to take into account the norms of the field. And that takes a lot of judgment. But there are different grants now, different R grants now that are out there, different surgical consortium grants, for example, looking at impact that are actually funded through Blue Cross Blue Shield. I mean, these are huge grants. All of that counts. It just, it has to have an element of peer review, and it has to be legitimate scholarship of some type. So but that's a tough question. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, as we all know, the funding line is not so hot. And people are now weighting more heavily foundation grants, especially if they're highly competitive, and other grants. So that's a bit of a moving target.
And how about industry grants?
Industry grants are important and are becoming increasingly valued, but it really still hasn't crossed over to kind of a national peer review process. Yes?
Like on the instructional track, I imagine if you were going up 10 or 15 years ago, you could get an R01 by year 4 or 5, and then the success rates were maybe 3 times what they are now. On your end, in terms of the leadership of promotions who are putting these together and getting them up to the Board of Regents, is the leadership made up of individuals themselves who are currently getting, say, R01s, or who know what it is like in the last couple of years to apply for an R01, get it, not get it, have to reapply? People who are sort of fresh in the system, not perhaps reflecting on the success of what they had 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah. The advisory committees are all senior faculty members. So on the instructional track, they were promoted and tenured, so they had to go through that process. But they continue to be active faculty members. And I'll tell you, it's very well known that where before gaps in funding was like a catastrophe, how could that possibly happen? Now it's not so unusual. And many people, advanced folks, who've had 2 or 3 grants, now they're down to 1 and trying to get back the other couple. I mean, we all live in the same environment. So it's not that people think that the world is like it was 20 years ago. And I never had that fund line that good, geez, 3 times. The best I ever did was the 17th percentile, which is much better than it is now. Yeah.
You mentioned that going up for promotion earlier than 5 years is considered early. If you kind of work very hard early on and kind of check a lot of those boxes, is that a possibility too, or is it a strict timetable that you can't, on the clinical track, go for a promotion from assistant to associate until 7 years?
No. Anything greater than 5 years is considered on time. Early promotions can go forward, but that better be a really strong package. But yeah, you can go up after your 5th year, and there is no outer limit to when you can go up. And with the changes, I'll just tell you, in the guidelines, we're actually seeing people, as I said, it showed you before, about in the 7th year, people tend to go up. All of a sudden, we're seeing some packages, 13th year, 17th year. It's because their career trajectory wasn't accounted for in the old system. All right, well, I will stay around. There's some refreshments and be happy to talk.